How you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today on Friday, October 18th, to close out the week, talk about the start of Week 7 that started off last night with the Broncos taking on the New Orleans Saints. We're going to have that on the menu for you guys today to talk about. Also, we're going to get to the second part of the game picks that we left off of yesterday. Also, in today's show, we got Troy Aikman talking about the Cowboys even on their bye week and really dunking all over them and their efforts so far through the year. We're going to get to that and much more on today's show, so make sure to stick around. And also, before we get started, if you guys want to get involved with the show, give out any opinions, share any questions, or just any comments you'd like to make, please don't hesitate to do that. We always want to hear your input and insight on anything we talk about during these live shows. And now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and it gets featured on this show, there's an easy way to do that now. Just by using the new Super Chat feature available to you guys. You guys can just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a great way to just support our channel, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content that you love, and we appreciate every time you guys are able to do that for us. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as conversational as always. Here to round out the week on a Friday. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about today, so please don't hesitate to share your opinion. But with that now out of the way, we can talk about what we saw last night, because it was a game between the Denver Broncos and the New Orleans Saints. Not necessarily the most exciting must-watch team so far, but the story was Sean Payton returned to New Orleans last night, the same night that Drew Brees, his former quarterback in New Orleans, was inducted into the Saints Ring of Honor, and Sean Payton and his new team walked right in there and ruined everything for the Saints and this celebration. The Broncos won pretty convincingly, 33-10, to take them now to 4-3 on the year, and the Saints unfortunately lose their fifth game in a row, and now ever since starting 2-0, obviously, now they're sitting at 2-5, and just like we had discussed, just like we had thought of in the preview, the Broncos defense was, going to make this offense for the Saints really uncomfortable. I think last week with the Buccaneers, they had them stick around a little bit. Spencer Rattler looked great. The offense put up 27 points, and for a moment there, you thought, Spencer Rattler's doing pretty well. Like, could he actually win this game? But of course, the Buccaneers pulled away, and now in this game, they never really had a chance to give up the game or even really be considered to be in the game, because right from the start, the Broncos, looked like they were just on a different mindset, where it looked like they were a bit more focused. They knew exactly what they wanted to do, what kind of plays would have worked against this Saints defense, and they just looked a little bit better. I guess prepared would be the most accurate word in this game. They were up for the challenge a lot more than I felt the Saints were. I felt the Saints came out a little bit flat with a couple punts to start off the game. And even though the Broncos only put up field goals to start, still, it was something that they piled on surely as the game went on. But, with this game overall, I thought the injuries were a big thing, obviously, for the Saints, right? With the fact that there was no Olave, no Rashid Shaheed. Also, the offensive line was all out of whack as well. They had a bunch of new guys playing. And with Sean Payton coming in, him being extra motivated to come back and win in his former home, all of that really just didn't have me uber positive about the Saints and their chances in this game. But I thought the Broncos, still to their credit, surprised me with how their offense looked as well. I thought it would be a lot closer. I thought it would be a bit more of a low-scoring game for both of these teams. I guess it was for the Saints. But the Broncos, I didn't expect them to put up maybe any more than 24 points, but they scored 9 more points than that. And, the Broncos outgained the Saints in this game, actually, 389 to 271, which is very impressive overall, right? But also, while that is great for the Broncos, right, with a new young rookie quarterback and whatnot, still how much of that is on the Saints, right? How much of the blame should they get on this loss because of the fact that they just aren't a good team potentially? And I feel tricked by the Saints. I really do. I feel like they've misled a lot of us. And after 2 weeks, right, everything's good. Everyone's overreacting. The good vibes are everywhere. They're just beating the heck out of the Cowboys. Everyone's praising them, right? But then after that, it kind of fell flat. There were some more injuries, and everyone's dealing with injuries, right? But it just felt like the Saints, I don't know, like lost that mystique on offense. And of course the injuries are huge when you don't really have an extra amount of playmakers out there, outside of Olave and Shaheed, right, and Kamara that was playing out of his mind. It's pretty thin, right? It's not like you have a couple more guys coming in that are just going to pick up the slack with those guys missing, and I think that was pretty evident in last night's game. And getting to some of the better performances in this game, Bo Nix had a clean game. He was 16 of 26 with 164 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, wasn't sacked either in this game. Javonte Williams had a solid game, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 14 carries. Bo Nix also added 75 yards as well. So really taking advantage of his athleticism against the Saints team that is finding it really hard to stop almost anybody. And this, again, wasn't a good look for them. Troy Franklin had a decent game. No passing touchdowns, obviously, but Troy Franklin led all of the receivers with 5 receptions and 50 yards in this game. And on the Saints side, Spencer Rattler had a better debut game against the Buccaneers, but in this one it was very just underwhelming, I guess. 25 of 35, 172 yards. He was sacked 6 times in this game, so it really just wasn't all on him, more so on just the entire offense. But the running game basically wasn't there. Kamara had 7 carries for 10 yards. Kendre Miller was the leading rusher with 36 yards, so very, very bad day there. And Cedric Wilson, he scored the only touchdown, but he only had 57 yards and 6 receptions. So, yeah, it pretty much said a lot about how the game went for the Saints if you didn't decide to tune in, right? If you just decided to skip this week. But it kind of started like as an interesting game because the Broncos were only kicking field goals. And even though the disparity in the start of the game was pretty big, the Saints ran 22 plays in the first half, and the Denver Broncos ran almost double that at 43 plays in the first half. But it was 16-3 at halftime, and like I said, there was maybe all 4 or 3 of the field goals that the Broncos kicked came in the first half, basically. So it never really felt too bad. Like, you saw them play, you saw the Saints were really struggling, but with the score like that, you're thinking, maybe something could happen in the second half. But it was more of the same, really. Or if anything, the Broncos kind of found their groove a little bit more. And once the second half started, Javonte Williams scored his second touchdown, and it never really clicked yet there for the Saints. Spencer Rattler lost 2 fumbles as well, not really helping his case out too much in his second game of his young career. So he didn't play that great. The offensive line didn't do him any favors. Also, they were abysmal, and it's hard to get your playmakers the ball. Kamara didn't have a great game and everything like that. So the Saints were actually held to 3 points basically the entire game up until 1 minute and 22 seconds left. And I think it was the third quarterback coming in now at this point and throwing a touchdown to Cedric Wilson. So, that really didn't matter. And in this game, just Bo Nix did his job, and the Saints offense really, I mentioned they kind of misled us, but they really dropped the ball in this game just because last week with Spencer Rattler, I kind of expected this sort of game out of them last week, and they really went out there for what it's worth. The young rookie ignorance, or the being just so naive that you just go out there and you're not really thinking about it. But this week, certainly, it looked like they were out of their league. And we're not talking about major contenders here per se. The Broncos are good, but they're not that good also. And I'd like to give them a bit more credit, but The injuries are huge to the Saints, and I don't want to just jump over that, but this defense for the Saints is really worrying. They were supposed to hold their own this year. I think that was a bit more of a safer bet this year for the Saints, that they still had Demario Davis, Cam Jordan, Chase Young came over, Tyrann Mathieu on that side, Marshawn Lattimore, but they haven't really been good, in terms of allowing points. Since week 4, they've given up 26 points to the Falcons, 26 points to the Chiefs, 51 points to the Buccaneers last week, and now 33 to a Broncos team that's not so prolific on offense. And more numbers on their defense are 146 rushing yards allowed per game is 28th in the NFL. They've allowed 248 passing yards per game, which is also 28th in the NFL. And they're allowing the most total yards per game, nearly averaging 400 yards allowed per game is this defense. And it's just not good enough, especially for a head coach that was the defensive coordinator for Sean Payton, and now your defense is really what's holding you back. It's not lining up, and it's not a good look for the whole entirety of the Saints, but also Dennis Allen. And I guess just lastly here on Denver, I've been critical of the Broncos for even selecting Bo Nix, but slowly I'm starting to believe more in this defense. Right now, I think they're tied with the Giants, if not in first place now in the number of sacks that they have. So that's such an unbelievably underrated weapon that teams have that really makes a difference. And their offense, it's getting there. They definitely need more pieces. Courtland Sutton, I don't know if he didn't play last night or if Marshawn Lattimore was just clamping him up. But, the receivers did all right. Again, I just trashed the Saints defense. So they were going up against that defense. But I feel like with the Broncos, what I was left with was the fact that, they're going to be all right going forward. I feel like Bo is slowly convincing me a little bit more. And with Sean, with his expertise and the pieces that they're putting around him with a great defense, I think they're going to be all right a lot sooner than definitely what I thought, and I think than a lot of people think as well. So, yeah, very good game for the Broncos, but also very disappointing for the New Orleans Saints. They could potentially get Derek Carr back, though, next week, so we'll keep an eye on that. But speaking of quarterbacks, mentioning quarterbacks there like Derek Carr, we're going to get to a former quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys in Troy Aikman. He appeared on a podcast or a radio show over the last couple days and had a lot to say about the Cowboys offense, specifically their wide receivers, and how they could be a reason why this passing game and the offense in general has been so lackluster and underwhelming. We're going to get into what Troy Aikman said. He said a lot and he didn't hold anything back, so we'll get back to that after this next break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to discuss a Hall of Fame quarterback in Troy Aikman and basically calling out the Cowboys, his former team, during their bye week this week. And it's crazy how everyone always says it now, how the Cowboys, whenever they're just playing, whenever they're mentioned, obviously during the NFL season, they're always a big talking point. But even still, during their bye week, they give you a lot to talk about. If not anybody currently playing for them, it's somebody related to them, and this time it's Troy Aikman, like I said. The Hall of Fame quarterback was not happy with what he's seen so far from the offense, obviously, with the lack of running game and whatnot, and Dak not really playing to the level they showed last year. His fault as well, as much as it is, the offense overall, like we've talked about. But he pointed out the wide receivers as a possible culprit to the passing game struggles, and it was pretty interesting that he pointed out to the wide receivers, but also even more interesting what he had to say about them, because he didn't really hold back too much at all. Because he said, "I think the routes are terrible. I think they run terrible routes, and I've thought that beyond this year. I think CeeDee has got to improve in his route running. As a quarterback, if you're not certain where guys are going to be consistently, it's hard to play the position. That's what I see. I see guys lazy coming off the line of scrimmage. Sometimes they run. Usually if they do, it's because they're anticipating they're getting the football on that play, but if they're not, they don't." And apart from that, apart from just calling out directly guys like CeeDee and just the entire wide receiver group, he also said that he was looking at the 49ers receivers, the Ravens receivers, and like the Packers as some of the examples of that. They show full effort even when they're not getting the ball, and he compared it to the Cowboys and stuff like that, and calling them lazy and things like that as well, coming off of the line of scrimmage. And I mean, to be fair to the Cowboys, that hasn't been my overall takeaway from watching the Cowboys. Do they look lazy coming off the line of scrimmage? I think you really have to be looking for that to have that be a diagnosis of some sorts, but I haven't really paid too much attention to that so far. The reactions on the sidelines with CeeDee and Dak, and CeeDee getting pretty upset by it. Those sort of things, if you want to talk about, maybe not giving as much effort or just pouting and crying about something, that's been more evident to me. Calling them lazy and saying their route running is terrible, I haven't paid too much attention to that, but apparently that's what Troy Aikman has noticed so far. And with the Cowboys, it's one thing to be outmanned, not have the right personnel in this year, and we've talked about that ad nauseum, really. The fact that they haven't added anyone, they lost a lot of starters, they haven't added anybody prolific enough to really help them improve from what they had last year, and they took too long to re-sign, Dak Prescott, especially CeeDee Lamb. That's something else that Troy Aikman mentioned on the show that he was on as well. But all of that it's not fine, but compared to not giving effort, that's the last thing you want to hear, is that someone, especially someone so revered by Cowboys and, the legacy of the Cowboys like Troy Aikman, calling the players lazy and not showing effort in these moments. And it has looked bad for Troy and for the Cowboys receivers to not play well. It's definitely looked bad, but it's something else when someone questions your effort level, right? Especially after 7 weeks. We still got a long way to go. So if you're questioning the effort now, what's it going to look like in about 3 or 4 weeks when they go through a gauntlet of teams that I don't really favor them in any matchup? So what's that going to look like? If it's so bad right now, we might not even recognize this Cowboys team in like 4 weeks when whatever the record is. So I thought that was pretty surprising, especially because he included CeeDee Lamb, and CeeDee Lamb is the only guy that really scares you on that offense. But even still, the connection with Dak hasn't really been there. The fact that they are so one-dimensional, everybody focuses on CeeDee Lamb, so it's no secret why. Maybe this is the only thing I'll say to justify kind of the Cowboys and their receivers. When you know that whatever you're doing isn't working, and when you're losing, you're getting beat up like that, it is hard to show maximum, like pep in your step, go out there energized, like clapping it up, thinking that you're going to mount a comeback. After you've gotten beat up so many times already, it kind of, it hurts your morale. And that's the only thing I'll say to kind of justify them. But still, it is something pretty bold to say, I would say, to just say that out and publicly about the Cowboys so far. And usually when you're talking about effort and things like that, I think it's natural to go and think about why that is and the culture and things like that, and why your efforts are being questioned, right? That should be one of the things that should never be questioned. I would think out of a team like the Cowboys that wants to be in the position where the Lions are and the 49ers are and things like that, but nobody would ever in their right mind question the effort of a Dan Campbell team, of a Shanahan team, of a Matt LaFleur team with the Packers and whatnot like that. So, what could be leading to this, right? And I think it usually reflects on a lot of the times the leadership and the guys that establish a culture and trying to keep the morale up. They're only, I want to say 3-3 right now, and it feels like it's very down. It feels like it's already they're already giving in to hearing everybody talk about them, how their season's done. There's no hope for them. It's going to end the same way as it did last year, or if not even worse. It feels like they're buying into that now. And usually you have strong enough leaders in that locker room to kind of combat that, but it really hasn't been like that with their head coach, Mike McCarthy, their quarterback, Dak Prescott, and even their best player, CeeDee Lamb. What it tells me really is that the culture is pretty fragile, and they're unable to respond well enough to adversity, right? They're just buying in to accepting the fact that at least it looks like when you're questioning the effort that that they're done this year, like they're buying into that already. And it kind of relates back to if you want to talk about really establishing the culture to this team, of course it starts from the top with Jerry Jones and the fact that we kind of saw how he handled some adversity, right? When someone came at him and criticized them, fairly so, mind you, he became very hostile. So if you got a guy like Jerry not reacting too well to it and sharing those comments publicly to the radio host and being pretty upset by it, it trickles down, right? It reflects. I'm sure all the players heard it. I'm sure they didn't feel great about it. And now with their owner kind of, panicking, being shaken up by the fact that his team's getting criticized by this, and he almost not really having an answer to why they're so bad other than blaming himself, right? Like most people would say, it trickles down. And then once all the players hear it, it's hard to really be motivated going forward. And when you're talking about someone trying to step up, you don't really see anybody doing that. And what's even worse is that you have these comments by Troy Aikman, but also you had Mike McCarthy saying something like the practice hasn't been good enough, and Dak Prescott echoed the same thing, like players aren't just practicing well enough as well. So you have the effort, and then somehow to make it worse, the two leaders of your team, basically on the player standpoint, are saying that the practices now aren't good enough. So what are we doing then? If the practices aren't good enough, then obviously the games are going to look exactly the same, and that's a problem. Then you're really almost doubling down on the fact that this team is already giving up on itself. And looking at the leaders and someone to kind of snap out of it, they're not doing it. And it's not really a surprise to me either, because the head coach isn't really able to steer the ship when he knows this is probably going to be the last year. They haven't resigned him. Coming off of the loss that they had last year in the playoffs and the fact that it's not going any better, I'm not surprised that Mike McCarthy isn't able to break through to these players and get them motivated. Also, the quarterback, Dak, I don't know. I mean, he's not playing great, and I feel like with players, you can only hear so much like rah, trying to hear motivational things from a quarterback where he's the highest paid guy. And then, it kind of gets into a weird spot where that guy's making a lot of money, and he's pretty much locked in. He's got his future locked in. So depending on how the Cowboys play this year, honestly, it doesn't really affect Dak too much. So you can only hear that guy try and motivate you so much that it gets to a point where you're like, all right, you just start to tune him out, because it doesn't really break through enough. You guys are still getting your butts kicked, so you don't really want to hear Dak talk or trying to be motivated or something like that. And, CeeDee, he's one of the guys that's being questioned for his effort in route running. So none of these guys are able to step into a leadership position and really think that or try and steer the ship and try to get everybody refocused. And I think I used this analogy a while ago when we talked about the Cowboys, that they just look like a ship that's kind of just coasting and treading water out at sea, and they have no idea, no way to maneuver or guide themselves, anywhere. They're just kind of floating by, and whatever happens, happens. If a big wave comes and just smacks the heck out of them like the Lions did, they can't do anything about it. They're just drifting out at sea, and it's a weird spot to be in also because, again, going back to Jerry Jones, and it's not really about him based on what Troy was saying, but you can't help but connect it back to him because I feel like he overestimated the kind of players and the kind of people, leaders, I guess, that he had in his locker room because of the fact that he really believed that running it back a whole nother year with the same group of guys was going to produce different results this time. But really what we've seen so far, and what everybody pretty much predicted, was the fact that this Cowboys team are running it back, running the exact same thing back and expecting different results, which is the definition of insanity. But not only that, they lost a bunch of players. So the fact that he felt so confident in these guys, it's kind of backfiring on him, right? That's why he's receiving the criticism. That's why some of his most important players are being questioned as leaders and really establishing the culture at this point in time. So it's not surprising that someone like Troy Aikman is saying these comments. And, it feels like this Cowboys team really lacks any sort of substance and really any true character, I guess you could say, as the last statement here. Because this year was a chance to kind of prove everybody wrong, right? Everyone was calling you insane for running it back, and Jerry Jones took a big risk in running it back, like I said. And of course now it's not paying out to kind of benefit him, but it was still an opportunity for guys to step up and prove everybody wrong, but they've just fallen on their face pretty much the entire year, and they just haven't shown up and stepped up to these challenges that they face. They just keep getting beat up at home. It's crazy to how just easily teams just run all over them, and to question their character and stuff like that. You would never question a Mike Tomlin-led team, a team with, what you're going to get out of them, establish that culture yet again, right, with the Steelers. Just looking at it last year, their quarterback situation, their offense was awful, and still they made the playoffs. That's a team, that's when, you lose a bunch of guys, your team's not one of the touted favorites, but you still are decent enough and are sure enough in yourself to go out and make the playoffs. No one questions what Dan Campbell's doing in Detroit, right? They've established a culture. You know what you're going to get out of the Lions, and that's the last thing anyone would say about a Dan Campbell-led team. Same thing goes for the Chiefs. You know what you're going to get out of them, the dynasty, the mystique that they've built up, and you can say the same thing about a bunch of teams, right? The really good ones. So it says a lot that the Troy Aikman brought this up. Pretty bold claims in a week where the Cowboys aren't even playing, but when someone says something like this about you, it really hits hard, I think, for Cowboys to kind of come to this realization, I guess. And the next couple of weeks are going to be interesting, right? The bye week is coming at a good time where they can kind of regroup. Comments like this don't really help, but if you want to get motivated, it could serve as that sort of tool for you if they wanted it to be. But yeah, like the next couple weeks are certainly going to be interesting for this team if they're able to kind of pick themselves up and respond, or are we going to see more of the same? I'll be interested to watch that come next week. But for right now, talking about teams in the Cowboys that aren't playing, we're going to get to the teams that are playing this week and finish up the game weeks that we didn't finish last episode yesterday. So after this break, we're going to come back, talk about the remaining 6 matchups that we have on Sunday, and break them down and pick a winner for those 6 games. Don't go anywhere. We got a lot more coming up after this.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Back here now on the show to jump back and finish the game picks that we didn't finish off of on yesterday. We got part 2 in today's show. It works out better timing-wise. I feel like I rush when I try to get everything crammed in. So we're going to get to part 2 today and talk about the remaining games. You know, we got some interesting games in this later slate that I have on here. So to bring it up to you guys and show you what I'm talking about, we got it all up here on your screen. You can see the remaining 6 matchups, and one of the most entertaining ones, obviously in the bottom right corner, the Chiefs taking on the 49ers. We'll get to that. But we're going to start on the opposite side there with the Seahawks and the Falcons. The Falcons on a 3-game winning streak, while the Seahawks on a 3-game losing streak. Both of these teams coming in and trending in opposite directions, right? The Seahawks have lost their last 3 games by giving up at least 29 or more points to the 49ers, to the Giants, and to the Detroit Lions over their last 3 weeks. Then also, now you have Atlanta and how potent their offense has been ever since the I would say, I guess since the Chiefs game, since that moment, they've scored 26 or more points in their last 3 games, and they've just handled business with that big win over the Buccaneers, which was a shootout. That was an awesome win. They just handled the Panthers pretty easily, and they're getting by. And I mean, they're not just getting by; they're really beating up on teams, and it's really great to see, I guess, out of Kirk. And everything Kirk says now is so funny. With the quote he had to say about, I don't even know what he was talking about, but Kirk playing great, feeling great, obviously, in Atlanta. That's great to see. Drake London's really coming up and blossoming into a great receiver. And the Seahawks' biggest problem on the other side has been the turnovers recently. And their inconsistent run game has put them in positions where they have to throw so much, and they just haven't been as disciplined with the football to not turn it over. And they actually lead the NFL now, last time I checked, in turnovers. So after their last game, albeit. So it's weird where the Seahawks are because of how they started, right? But ever since then, they hit their first hiccup, and they haven't really recovered from it. And, you know, hopefully now after 3 games, they could at least be a bit more responsible with the football and not just give the game away. And this will be a good test against them, but it's not enough for me. I'm not convinced enough by the Seahawks to pick them, especially on the road. I think Atlanta, they're just playing really clean football on both sides. You know, Kirk can do no wrong. He's saying all the right things. Everyone's feeling great about Kirk in Atlanta. And on the other side of the ball, too, they do enough to hold teams off, knowing that their offense is hitting on all cylinders. So it looks like they really know who they are. So for that reason, I'm going to go with the Falcons in this game. Then the second AFC North game of the year so far, the Bengals have played in both of them. And this time, I think it's fair to say they have a lot easier challenge, right, against the Cleveland Browns. It's a shame. It's a shame the Browns have just given up on this year and just punted it away because of the fact that they traded away Amari Cooper and the fact that they still have Deshaun Watson starting. I mean, after this week, which, you know, spoiler, I'm picking them to lose. If Kevin Stefanski comes up there again and tells everyone that Deshaun gives them the best chance of winning, like, come on, like, there should be like a rule about like directly not lying to the media, right? You've just given away your best player, and I'm assuming, unless Deshaun really proves everyone wrong, I'm assuming that Deshaun's not going to have another great game and that he's just going to get outplayed by Joe Burrow and that offense that they have. You know, like, you can only say so much before it just becomes noise, because at this point, the actions are speaking louder than what Kevin Stefanski and what the Browns are actually saying. They're about to be 1-5, if I'm not mistaken, or 1-6 if they haven't gone on their bye already. So, yeah, it's not a game where before the season, if you looked at this game, you would probably get pretty excited about it. But Deshaun and the offense have just really let everyone down, and the Bengals have enough to get by this game. They didn't look great in their last game against the Giants, but the Giants have a pretty good defense, and they beat the Browns. So in this game, the way the Browns are playing and the fact that they've just given up, I'm going to go with the Bengals, obviously. I think they'll win and get closer to getting to 500. Then, moving down the line, this game was really hard to decide on because it's a lot of unknowns, and I'm just not really too convinced yet by either of these two teams. Not really by the Dolphins, just because of the quarterback situation, right? They are coming off of a bye, so hopefully that's giving them some more time to kind of regroup and reassess everything. And we already has been reported that Tua and Mike McDaniel has said that he expects Tua to play again in 2024. So at some point in the next 2 months, we're going to get Tua back. And how this Dolphins team looks in terms of record and what their chances are to still be in contention for something are going to be huge. And it's going to start with this game. Anthony Richardson is coming back for the Indianapolis Colts. So that's going to be huge for them. And also, they're kind of similar in a way that I'm not too convinced by this offense without Tua, because it's been looking pretty bad. But the Colts' run defense is 31st in the NFL in rushing yards and rushing yards per game. Their passing defense, too, isn't fantastic either. So that might open up the door a little bit for the Dolphins to maybe make this game close. But it doesn't do enough for me, and it feels weird saying that because, the Colts, they just came off of a 3-point win over the Titans. They were in another nail-biter against the Jaguars as well, so they're very, hit or miss. They have good players. I love Josh Downs. He's been playing very good this year. Richardson, he's been in, but he's gotten hurt, and the performances where he has played haven't been too convincing. Joe Flacco comes in there, and he throws the heck out of that ball. So he's going to be the starter, obviously, Richardson going forward, but it hasn't looked completely clean to the level of Joe Flacco. And he's still young, but I feel like he does need to put out some more convincing performances going forward. But with that being the case, with everything being so even, I think I'm still going to go with the Colts. And they just have Shane Steichen, and I think it's so important that we mention the play callers, the scheme wizards, if you will, for some of these teams where it might be close in terms of personnel, quarterback situations, records, and whatnot. But looking at guys like Kevin O'Connell, like Sean McVay, like the job even Cliff Kingsbury is doing in Washington, these things make the difference. And I think Shane Steichen has proven that. You just see the year that he's had with Jalen Hurts back when they made the Super Bowl, and how Jalen Hurts hasn't looked the same since then. And because of Shane, I believe that this offense is very good, very dangerous, very underrated. So because of that, I'm going to go with the Colts. I think they just have a little bit more convincingly going for them than the Dolphins do at this point. Until Tua comes back, it's hard for me to pick them. What's not hard is for me to pick the Commanders over the Panthers. The Commanders are going to win. It's fascinating, though, how these are two examples of what to do with an organization to kind of pick it up and build it up from the ground, and what not to do as well. What not to do is what the Panthers have done with their personnel, the head coaching, the player, also personnel. It just hasn't been good as an organization development-wise for Bryce Young, whereas in the other side of things, just looking at how the Commanders going from last year and how pretty bad it was, and now going to this year and how they attacked the offseason. They brought in a new owner 2 years ago, a new general manager, new head coach, new offensive coordinator, and a bunch of new pieces all in this offseason because they had a clear plan. They knew what they were doing, and knowing that the quarterback, they had a good chance to draft a really good one, they took advantage of it, and now look at them now. They were in the basement last year with the Panthers, and now they're flying. They're considered one of the best teams probably in the NFC right now, with a quarterback that everybody loves. So it's so interesting how it's two examples of that. But in terms of the game, I think everyone saw enough out of the Commanders last week against the Ravens, albeit in a loss, that they're going to win this game. The Panthers, after this loss, they might sell a bunch of their players anyway, so I feel like that's the way it's trending, and the Commanders will win this one. They're going to have Brian Robinson back too, which is going to be huge. So give me the Commanders. And looking at the last couple games here in this one, the Raiders and the Rams, I mentioned that the Rams have to win this game, and also the Raiders have just lost their best player on offense. Their quarterback situation isn't great either, with Aiden O'Connell not really convincing you. Gardner Minshew's already been benched. And the Rams, I feel like, just have more to play for, right? Because they are better than their 1-4 record that they have right now. And my biggest fear with the Rams, because they are so good and they have good players, is the fact that their record is just too much to overcome, and they have to basically throw away a season where Matthew Stafford isn't getting any younger, obviously. You can't afford to lose a year just for free like that with a guy like that as your quarterback. And that's the last thing they need to do because of how good they are. I like their defense a lot too, with Braden Fisk and Jared Verse playing very well. Kobe Turner, again, from last year, playing very well. And their secondary too, I'm a big fan of. So I feel like the Rams have enough to win this game. The Raiders are trending in the wrong direction, much like the Browns, much like the Panthers. I feel like a loss or two more could really blow this entire thing up. So I like the Rams in this one to win and try and get something going here. And then lastly here, one of the best games that we have, along with the Texans and Packers and whatnot, the Lions and the Vikings. This one is right up there. This one's America's Game of the Week. And this one, I believe, is going to be on Fox with Tom Brady. And it's a Super Bowl rematch from last year. So with me, I didn't really focus too much on who's playing and like the personnel of it. It just comes down to a point where the 49ers have to just, say like enough is enough. At some point, this 49ers team has to beat this Chiefs team, because we have them in a conversation where both of these teams are on equal playing grounds, right? They're on the same level of elite. But if the 49ers can't even beat this Chiefs team with no Hollywood, with no Pacheco, with no Rashee Rice, they're still a good team. They're undefeated for a reason, but this 49ers team is right there with them. And if anyone's going to beat them, it's going to be a team like the 49ers. And if the 49ers truly want to obviously get something going, because I believe they're 3-3 or something like that, taking another loss would stink. But to be considered and be in that upper echelon of teams like the Chiefs, like the Ravens, like the Lions, you got to beat this team now, because there's no guarantee that you're going to beat them later on with Hollywood back, potentially coming back, maybe Pacheco coming back. You got to beat them right now when you at least can, or at least have a fighting chance to do it when their guys are injured. You're going to be at home also. And, I would have second thoughts about the 49ers if they lose this game to the Chiefs. And I know Andy Reid and Patrick are game changers just by themselves, but, come on. The 49ers have to beat this team. And I think it would do a lot of great things for them to kind of get over this mental hurdle of being scared every time the Chiefs come in the vicinity of them. They got to beat them. They got to get over this hurdle that they keep tripping on. So I'm going to go with the 49ers. I'm going to go with them to win. They better win against this Chiefs team, because come the playoffs, a whole different team could show up, honestly, for the Chiefs. So this is their chance to beat them. And I'm going to go with the 49ers here to win in Week 7. And those are all the games now on Sunday. I am excited to see the Monday night doubleheaders come back this upcoming Monday. So we're going to talk about that next week, obviously. But we're going to move on to another topic, talking about the Raiders just now. Their other big star, Max Crosby, could potentially be traded. Based on his comments, right, reading into them, it doesn't feel very reassuring, to say the least. So we're going to get into what Max Crosby had to say recently on the idea of winning right now and not being interested in a rebuild, essentially, which is what the Raiders look like they're trending to. So we're going to discuss that, break it down, and give our thoughts on that when we return in just a few seconds.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Now, moving into our next topic on today's show, we already saw one star leave the Las Vegas Raiders, and now we could potentially see another one, this time being Max Crosby, maybe pondering over the idea of maybe his long-term future is not with this Las Vegas Raiders team. And, it's only been days after Davante Adams has parted ways with the Raiders, and it seems crazy because recently, it would signal that this team has accepted a rebuild, and that's something that Max Crosby is not really thinking of if they decide to offer him up as a trade piece, right? If they really don't feel like the season is going their way, they could offer Max Crosby, and it seems like he's not really thinking of trying to stay with this team to rebuild, essentially, because the way Max Crosby, appears to be, obviously I've never met him, obviously, so he's always, it seems like a guy that's just trying to at least compete, be competitive, and be in contention for something. And whether or not that be with the Raiders or any other team in the NFL, he's a guy that's going to give 100%, obviously, right? And for him to be like that and be so loyal and be so grateful to the Raiders, but in the same breath, if they, lose this week and maybe they start answering questions differently in terms of long term, maybe they think that, or answer a question about a rebuild and think that that's reasonable for them to approach it that way, or maybe they trade away somebody else. I don't think that would really sit well with Max Crosby, giving the season away already. And that's why I feel like his name is being mentioned in some trade rumors, because he's just too good to not be on a contending team at this point in time. And based on the idea of, facing a rebuild, it's not something Max Crosby's really interested in. Surprise, surprise, right? Obviously, based on what I said. And this is what he had to say, actually, about it, on the idea of a rebuild. And he said, quite directly, he said, "I'm not here to rebuild. I'm here to win. So I don't know whatever that means, but I'm here to win now. Wherever I'm going or wherever I'm going to be here to win. So that's all that matters to me." And not to say that the Raiders aren't trying to do that also, but it's a weird situation. Again, I don't know if the Raiders if Las Vegas trading the best player necessarily shows that they're also trying to win right now as well, getting away from Davante and just accepting the fact that, he just wants to leave, so let's just let him leave. It doesn't really scream to me that they're having too many strong feelings about winning right now, right? Because if you really felt that you're going to win this year, there's no way you're trading away Davante Adams, right? It's just not going to happen. And from what we've seen so far, even carrying on into last year, it hasn't really been so over-the-top convincing, right? They've had some good moments. They've beaten the Chiefs, they've beaten the Ravens, but they haven't pieced it all together that really makes you think that all right, like, this team has figured it out, and now this is who they are, and this is how they're going to win games. There's been too much quarterback switching, just personnel switching and things like that, and it hasn't looked great on the football field either. They've had good wins, they've had good moments. I'm not saying they haven't, but truly being in contention to win, I don't know if they're going to get that in any sort of relative recent time period where Max Crosby is going to feel pretty confident that the Raiders can truly compete. And also, they're sitting at 2-4 with that uncertainty, like I said, at quarterback, and a rookie tight end is now their best player. So again, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that doesn't scream to me that this team is one of the teams that's going to compete this year already, right? They're 2-4 with having Devontae Adams, basically. They just traded him away, so you can only imagine what's going to happen without him, and we have seen it. They got blown out by the Broncos. They just got blown out by the Steelers, and they're going to be facing better teams going forward, so it's not looking great, and that's why I'm kind of manifesting this to happen, because I would like to see Max Crosby in a better situation. That's just me. And also defensively, with the guys that he's playing with, this Raiders defense has 83 missed tackles in the NFL. That's the most in the NFL so far, and it's not even showing that this is a team that could really compete for their division, right? With the numbers that they're putting up. They've been beaten by the Chargers already. The Broncos just stomped on them. You don't think the Chiefs are probably going to do the same thing? So we got to start with the division, right? And they seem like a long way away from that at this point in time. And I know that their owner, Mark Davis, has said just on Wednesday that he's not thinking or wouldn't consider trading Max Crosby, but often the lack of winning, and when you really start to pile up some losses in a very drastic way, oftentimes it really leading towards the deadline, I think it would be hard for Las Vegas to look at this roster and think after the deadline that we're just going to be okay with losing a lot of games, right? It's not going to look good for any team to lose this many games, so that usually leads to some reaction. So the next couple weeks are going to be important for them if they don't want these trade rumors to grow even more, right? Because the more they lose and the more like how bad they lose also, it's just going to make these rumors a lot louder, obviously, with Max Crosby. And who knows, he doesn't really strike me as the guy that's going to ask for a trade and just like storm in there and say that he wants to leave. I feel like he's too appreciative of the Raiders, too respectful, very grateful for what they've provided for him, obviously, and how he's built himself up there. I feel like he wouldn't do that to the Raiders. It would more so be them trying to plan for the future. So that's really the only thing I kind of see holding this up, other than the fact that the Raiders are just going to be stubborn about it. But so far also, looking at this Raiders team and trying to fish for something that gives you hope, it's hard to do so because one of their only couple wins has been against the Browns and the Ravens somehow. But since then, they've gone blown out by a couple bad teams, and Cleveland, there's not too much stock in that win that they have over them, to be quite honest. And also the Ravens is their biggest win. It's insane that they beat them, but still, going forward, the quarterback that even played in that game isn't even playing anymore. So it's a weird situation now with the Raiders, and also with just moving forward and talking about the games leading up into this deadline and how they're so important, right? They're going to be playing on the road against the Rams most recently, this upcoming Sunday, obviously, like we talked about. Then they're going to be at home against the Chiefs, and then they're going to be on the road against the Cincinnati Bengals, and they're probably going to lose all of those games, honestly. Definitely the last two. Maybe they could sneak one against the Rams, but I already picked the Rams to win, so they're going to lose, in my opinion. So at that point, you're 2-4 when November 4th hits on that Monday after those games, after, week 7, 8, after week 9. It's going to be November 4th, that Monday after week 9. So the trade deadline's just the next day, and you're sitting here at 2-7. I feel like that's enough incentive for this Raiders team to look at, all right, we're good with Max Crosby, right? Having a player like him on our team certainly makes us better. But the way that this roster is right now, is this going to be good enough to just sit on our hands and think that most of these players and Max Crosby are going to come back next year and be even better? That's a hard sell for me. And also, where they are in terms of how far they are on offense, I don't know how the quarterbacks are going to line up in the draft or anything like that. But that's another thing. I don't feel confident in Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell being the quarterbacks to compete with Justin Herbert, Mahomes, obviously, and even Bo Nix now. They need that position also. And plus, they need some more offensive line help. They need a running back. They need some more, cover guys, some better linebacking play as well. So they have a lot of needs, and I don't know if they're going to have enough to just turn things around next year. Next year could look a lot like this year as well. So a lot of teams, a lot of times, just trying to see where the Raiders stand right now. And at some point, it'll be interesting to see if Max Crosby really has had enough and he comes out and says that he wants to be traded, or if the Raiders sort of crack first and try and look for a trade now, put him out there on the market and say that they're taking calls, right? I'll be interested to see what cracks first. Probably the Raiders, if I were to guess, but Crosby overall, Max Crosby is at a great age right now at 27, where he needs to be competing, I believe, for how good of a player that he is, along with the Bosas, the Myles Garretts, the TJ Watts, obviously, even the Micah Parsons. They're on competing teams, at least for the most part. He's in that group, but for him to be the only one kind of going home already by the end of November, it's a shame, and I would like to see him compete on, teams that need a pass rusher still, like the Lions stand out, but that would be insane, like an insane trade to happen. Other teams that I'm just not thinking of right now, but he needs to be in a better situation, and I would love for him to end up in a better spot. So, it's not too likely right now, but the next couple weeks should certainly make it a bit more urgent for the Raiders to do something. So we'll keep an eye on that as we move forward with the show, but also with this development with Max Crosby. But in terms of the show, we got one more thing to talk about regarding trades. This time around, Mike Williams. 3 teams have reached out to the Jets so far about trading for Mike Williams. So we're going to talk about who those teams are, who does it benefit the most that Mike Williams joins their team, and also who just makes the most sense. We're going to talk about that in just a few seconds. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, just to talk about some more quick trade updates, this time regarding Mike Williams, a pretty popular name, I would say, in terms of trade, as far as trade candidates go, because as the trade deadline approaches, the teams get a better understanding, obviously, of what their rosters have already and what they still need, right, in terms of what is going to make you that much better going into the trade line and after the trade deadline, when you know there's not turning back in terms of who is on this roster. You get a better understanding of what you need to improve on, much like the Bills, obviously, realizing that the receivers right now are becoming a bit of a problem. Let's go get Amari Cooper, right? They've improved a lot. Same thing with the Jets. They had no other option but to go get Devontae Adams to salvage this season, so they went out and got him, obviously. The next couple weeks are going to make everything a bit tighter. It's going to make everything a bit more intense in terms of, you have some of these players out there. Are you going to be willing to pull the trigger and get one of these wide receivers, especially because they've been one of the the more talked about names, obviously with Amari and Devontae moving already. But even going back to the summer with Brandon Ayuk, Cortland Sutton being in a couple rumors as well. The receivers have definitely been getting a lot of love and a lot of attention with all those massive contracts obviously being handed out. The receiver position has been very popular over the last couple of months. So based on what we've seen with the recent moves and the recent trend with the market, the wide receiver market is set up to be the most popular, with guys still out there like DeAndre Hopkins, Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Christian Kirk potentially on the Jaguars, Mike Williams like we mentioned, and Darius Slayton I think are probably the most likely names to move before the trade deadline, and just based on the reports. But sticking to Mike Williams, because I feel like he's the next one to move. According to these reports, 3 teams have reached out to the Jets about Mike Williams so far. Those teams are the Los Angeles Chargers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the New Orleans Saints, according to The Athletic. And not really too surprising, considering that each team's situation with their passing games hasn't been great so far, and could arguably have gotten worse in terms of the Saints. So, I mean, the Chargers and the Steelers were on the list yesterday of the teams that I mentioned as, trading for wide receivers, obviously, like I said in yesterday's episode, and now they're being reported that they've reached out at least to the Jets to ask about Mike Williams. And looking at each situation right now and kind of breaking it down as to why they would love to add a guy like Mike Williams. You look at the Chargers, right? Their rookie wide receiver, Ladd McConkey, is their leading wide receiver in terms of receptions with 19, 32 targets, and 219 yards as well. They're all top of the leaderboard in terms of stats against all other wide receivers on the Chargers right now. So that's it's impressive for Ladd McConkey, but for the Chargers, you'd like to have somebody outside of just your rookie, right, who just stepped foot in your organization. You would like other people to step up, and maybe you don't really have it with Quentin Johnson and all the other guys that they have, but adding a guy like Mike Williams could be a interesting proposal for the Chargers, because right now they're sitting at 3-2, which isn't bad. They brought in a new regime with Jim Harbaugh, and it's going as good as you would have liked it to, right? With this running game, with this defense that has looked better. They were in a close game with the Chiefs as well. It's gone pretty well. And the fact that they, got rid of Keenan Allen, they got rid of Mike Williams in the summer, and had Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack take less money, they've certainly had to sacrifice some things. So it's not been a bad situation, but adding a guy like Mike Williams would certainly help to me, because this Chargers team is 29th in the NFL in terms of passing yards and passing yards per game. And I just feel like Justin Herbert needs somebody else to go to in these close games, where we saw it against the Chiefs and how frustrated he was in that game, because they missed on a lot of opportunities on offense. And a lot of that could just be because they don't have enough guys to really be a threat out there. So adding a guy like Mike Will, being familiar with Justin Herbert, being familiar with just the entire organization, could be intriguing. And it's not too much different with the Steelers, right? Because the Steelers are 28th in the NFL in passing yards and passing yards per game, only one spot, less bad, or one spot better than the Chargers at 29th. And another very good defense, right? Like the Chargers, they have a pretty good defense. The Steelers' defense, I would say, is probably better, but the offense is a problem, because if they make one mistake, it seems like the drive that they've had going so far, it feels like everything's ruined with a bad throw, one mistake. They're walking on eggshells on offense, and that's not a way to really, one, be confident in your offense and what you're doing, but also it's not a way to complement the defense that's pretty much doing everything for the offense to be afraid to make a mistake and taking the easy throws and not pushing the ball down the field and holding themselves back. It's not something that the Steelers team obviously needs, and it's a miracle that they're 4-2 right now. And to that point, though, the offense might be something, the play calling, the schemes, and all that might be one thing, but also it just feels like personnel-wise, with the receivers that they have, that could be another thing that's getting in their way, unfortunately, right? And I don't think I've mentioned Van Jefferson's name one time this year, and he's supposed to be a major contributor because of that wide receiver room that the Steelers have, right? Outside of George Pickens, it's Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson, Pat Freiermuth, a tight end, technically, and like Scotty Miller, Roman Wilson, who's a rookie. I think he should be playing more, but he's kind of getting back from an injury. So if the guy that you brought in, Van Jefferson, really isn't doing much so far, it's a problem. It's a problem because you need more clearly on that offense to get more out of this group. And again, being 4-2 isn't bad by any means, but they can't just give it up now, right? They can't just sit on their hands and think that this is going to be good enough. They need to make a move, and Mike Williams seems like someone that could at least get 3 catches in a game. I don't know how many receptions Van Jefferson has, but it hasn't been great. And then you get to the Saints, which could be as close to rock bottom as you could possibly get out of any of these situations, especially on offense, because of how they got outplayed pretty convincingly against the Broncos. And Chris Olave's been out with a concussion. They just lost one of their premier receivers in Rashid Shaheed. He's out for the year now. And they were in for trying to get Devontae Adams, right? They were interested because of Derek Carr. So now they need someone else to step in, especially now that Rashid Shaheed is out. And there's 22nd in the NFL in terms of passing yards and passing yards per game. So not that much better than the Steelers and the Chargers as well. They, to me, are the team that definitely needs him the most. I would say they're the team that, if they were to give up anything, they should be giving up the most to try and get Mike Williams. Certainly because of the fact that they lost Rashid Shaheed, like I said, but also that they're 2-5 right now. They've lost 5 straight games in a row. So if the urgency isn't at its absolute maximum right now, you're about a win or two away from really just throwing in the towel on this season. And not really being considered a contender compared to what we saw in the first 2 weeks. So because of that, they need something to go their way. If they were able to land Mike Williams, you would feel a lot better about this receiving group. And in that same breath, I do believe that the Chargers would make the most sense because of that familiarity with Herbert. It's a run-heavy offense anyway, so he doesn't need to do a lot. I feel like with the Jets, outside of Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams was supposed to be the guy that was supposed to contribute a lot to this team. And coming off of an injury to a new team, completely new team, it was never going to be easy. So I feel like that amount of pressure was a bit too much on Mike Williams. Whereas with with the Chargers, they know they want to run the ball a lot. And the fact that he's very familiar what they're doing already with that organization, with playing with Justin Herbert and whatnot, that'll help him out a lot to get up to speed. And the Jets, unfortunately, don't have enough time to provide this extra learning time for a Mike Williams. So with the Chargers, I believe it would make the most sense. It would be the best fit. And even still with Pittsburgh, adding a guy like Mike Williams, I wouldn't say necessarily improves them, because we don't know who's going to play quarterback. We don't know how well Russell Wilson's going to play and all that sort of stuff. It's still a mess with them. So I feel like the Chargers would make the most sense, and it would make a bigger change to me right away as opposed to the Steelers. So, those are the 3 teams that are reportedly involved the most. So maybe by next week, Mike Williams gets traded, hopefully. I would like to see that happen. I don't think he should stay with the Jets. I know it's only a 1-year deal and things like that, but they have their guys, right? They have Aaron Rodgers' guys. And I feel like for his sake, he could do a lot more somewhere else. So hopefully we see that happen at least before the trade deadline gets here, obviously on November the 5th. But that'll do it. That is going to wrap it up for the Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Thank you guys for joining me. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media and checking out both YouTube channels, the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube to catch more of this show in a variety of different ways around the NFL, still covering it on YouTube. And also lastly here, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time to catch more of these live shows and interact live with me, covering the NFL, all the headlines, debating, discussing things around the NFL, obviously, with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you guys for joining me. I hope you guys all have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys back here on Monday to break down what we saw on Sunday, but also talk about next week's Monday Night Football doubleheader.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't